I did my presentation on the Black Death. The pandemic that disrupted Europe during the Middle Ages of the 1300s was called the Black Death. Upwards of 30 million lives were lost due to this bacteria. The newly populated European cities were affected harshly and some were even wiped out. This had positive and negative effects for the future of Europeans after the plague. The Black Death can be seen as a result of the New World System. Population was ever growing, trading became very popular, and war was even evident. Europe had also hit its ecological limit. The people experienced climate changes such as different rainfall patterns, shortened growing seasons, and even a decrease in agricultural productivity. Therefore, people starved and famine was very present. Yersinia pestis was the name of the bacteria. It spread from Mongolia to China to northern India to western Asia. It was carried by fleas, and there was 3 forms of this bacteria that were present during the time. The bubonic plague, which infected the lymphatic system. Lymph nodes would swell up just as soon as a flea that was infected bit someone. Next, the septic plague. The infected flea would actually inject a microbe directly into the bloodstream of one, and death was near within hours without anyone knowing. Finally, and the most deadly form, the pneumonic plague. It infected the lungs and spread so quickly that nothing could be done. This disease spread so rapidly due to war and trading, and even people panicking, fleeing to different areas but not knowing that they had the plague. Paris, at the peak, saw around 800 deaths per day. Streets were filled with corpses because so many lives were lost and they did not know what to do with all the bodies. These cities that once were extravagant and populated were now ghost towns. Once the numbers of the plague started dropping in the early 1350s, with the low number of the population now, there was an overabundance of food and work. Europe was now far below its ecological limit, and people were healthier and lived better then than they do today. Also, birth rates and fertility rates soared. Lastly, people were able to move up in social classes. Their work became very valuable, but they did take advantage of their newly profound power, and established elites and aristocrats did not like their new demands and refused to give in to them. Therefore, they did not accept the newly rich and took extreme measures like dressing in extravagant clothing, eating exotic food and importing it, to show their power. This was a slide of the bacteria that doctors have today. And this is how the disease spread through Europe during the Middle Ages. What caught my eye the most was the amount of people taken out by the plague. 30 million people. That is very hard to accept to one. What also really caught my eye was doctors have never experienced a plague this bad. Therefore, they did not know what to do. Some corrupt doctors lied to hopeless families, saying that they could get a cure, but really there was no cure, and just took the money of those hopeless. After what people had went through of losing so many family members and friends and more than half their population, people were still being greedy. Peasants destroyed lands, the property, and killing those elites who requested their newly demands because they gained social classes. Also, the established elites took extreme measures to one-up the newly rich because they wanted to still have a social gap. They were ungrateful for what they have just went through, that they always wanted to show a social gap between the classes. This is my presentation on the Black Death.